with y'all. I want to give my take on Keith Thurman and all the recent, call outs and, seems like ploys for attention that he's been on lately. And for the most part, the call outs are really for Errol Spence Jr. He's kind of dismissive of Terrence Crawford, basically with the statement that Terrence Crawford should get away from Bob Arum. He's already said multiple times that, he would fight Terrence Crawford, but the money has to be a certain thing, and that's understandable. But right now, it's not in the cards with Bob Arum, and he's even saying that he can't fight Terrence Crawford because of Bob Arum. But he and Errol Spence Jr. are on the quote-unquote same side of the street. So he's trying to make that fight. All right. In my opinion, I think Keith is serious about making a fight. I think there are multiple reasons that Keith now wants to make this fight. And I'll just go ahead and put the first one out there. The first reason Keith wants to make the fight with Errol is basically the same reason that Danny Garcia and Sean Porter eventually came around and decided they wanted to make a fight with Errol after he had been chasing them. And it's money. It's the pay-per-view. Keith Thurman had a fight with Manny Pacquiao, saw a pretty nice payday, and fighting anybody else at 147, especially all the other guys on the PBC side, you're not looking at a pay-per-view fight. Substantial drop-off from what he made fighting Manny Pacquiao. I mean, that's just a given. Keith Thurman wanted to get a rematch with Manny Pacquiao. That wasn't to be. The only other guy he can expect to go into a pay-per-view with on the PBC side would be Errol Spence Jr. So I think you have that dynamic in play. Also, when Keith Thurman was considered to be the top dog at 147, after he had already beaten Danny Garcia, already beat Sean Porter, years before Errol Spence got a chance to fight him, Keith Thurman was a unified champion. And even after Keith Thurman got stripped, he still was considered to be a cut above those other guys because he was the only one who had been unified. So when he lost his WBC strap, he was still looked at as, well, he didn't lose his WBC belt in the ring. Nobody's ever beaten Keith Thurman. So Keith Thurman kind of sat on a perch and looked down. And you can go back and look at his interviews. You can tell how he talked about everybody else. Keith Thurman had this sense of self, this delusion of grandeur, that he was somehow like the baby Floyd Mayweather of the bunch, and that these guys are all looking up at him. And in terms of what he had accomplished, maybe they were, but he was not head and shoulders over these guys. He was just one notch above them in terms of what he had done. But a lot of people were clamoring to see the Errol Spence Jr. fight. And Keith Thurman had no interest in that fight. Every time Errol Spence Jr. Name came up, Keith Thurman started talking in parables, soliloquies. He turned into Captain O.G. Reed more from the old Saturday morning cartoon. Y'all heard me say that before. I mean, he had everything to talk about but making the fight. So now all of a sudden, as Errol Spence said, the tables have turned. And now Keith Thurman wants that fight. I'm not against the fight happening. But I'm also understanding that Errol has an order of business that he wants to try to take care of. And Keith Thurman doesn't fit into that equation at this point. Keith Thurman is not one of his mandatories. He's not a champion. He's not, he's not somebody that's going to get him to being undisputed if that's what his goal is and that's what he's saying. So if Errol Spence Jr. is basically saying he has a small window of fights left at 147 pounds. So I just don't see where Keith Thurman is going to fit into that picture. But, Keith Thurman did a lot of this to himself. Keith Thurman, conducted himself like a guy who had already arrived and had done so much, and he just, he didn't need these fights. They needed him. And then, basically what ended up happening is, aside from Keith Thurman getting the Manny Pacquiao fight, Keith Thurman ended up becoming the odd man out. So now when he talks about this stuff, he just sounds crazy. And even when there is some validity to what he's saying, it still comes across as he's crazy, or it's just he's just bitter because he got left out of the ball game. So, I look at it like this. At this point, Keith Thurman's still coming off a loss. He's coming off of 2 years of inactivity. He doesn't have a fight lined up thus far, even though there was talk of him and Porter running it back. I just think that Keith Thurman needs to worry about getting in the ring with a quality opponent and getting a win. And then pushing for a fight against another top-tier welterweight so he can establish himself as a top-tier guy. Because a lot of people are talking as if Keith Thurman is a has-been. And even when I hear people talk about the Shawn Porter rematch, they're talking about they expect Shawn Porter to beat Keith Thurman. So, Keith Thurman is looked at, and I'm sure a lot of them, dismiss Keith because of his loss to Manny Pacquiao. Because when you're the top dog in the division and you're 10, 12, 15 years younger than this legend, and y'all go in there and fight, and you lose, it's going to leave a stain on your resume, stain on your name, even though that guy is who he is. Especially when you talk the way Keith Thurman talks. So, I don't really have a lot of sympathy for Keith Thurman. Like I said, I just said what I feel like Keith Thurman should do. I mean, ultimately, it's his career. He'll do what he wants to do. But Keith Thurman has to do the things that he needs to do, in my opinion, to put himself back into the picture and back into the conversation at 147. And if he doesn't, get a quality opponent, get a win, I mean, to me, there's no point in him talking about Errol Spence Jr., Terrence Crawford, talking about going up to 54, challenging anybody worth their salt. I mean, I think at this point, he would probably, a rematch with Danny Garcia or Shawn Porter, in my opinion, is probably the best thing he could do. He has no interest in fighting these young up-and-coming guys. Just like when he was young and up-and-coming, he felt like, guys approaching 40 should have been fighting him. Well, now you got guys that are only, a few years younger than him, but they're up-and-coming, maybe like 6 years younger than him. He has no interest in giving them a shot. So, it is what it is at this point with Keith Thurman. That's all I got to say about the subject. D-Lo 404 Boxing. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. I'm out. Peace.